Good morning. Good morning. It is such a pleasure to be here. My partner and I of 26 years, we've lived all over the country. We've traveled a lot. And whenever we find a Unitarian Universalist church, we know that we're home. We're part of that component of the church called the UBUs, Unitarian Universalist Buddhists, and also known as the UBUs. And we are members of the Church of the Larger Fellowship, which is the virtual church of UUA. We were living in Colorado before we came here. We lived on top of a mountain. Our neighbors were elk and mountain lions, and it was a great life. But we couldn't get married. After all of those years together, we couldn't get married, and so we came here. One of the first things that happened to us here, we met the people at One Iowa. We met lots of gay and lesbian folk, but at some point we had to go out in the world. And we needed a television, and so we went to the Target department store. And we were looking at televisions, and Sumitra was looking at some, and I was looking at others, and the young man, the young sales clerk, I said, I think we want that one. And without missing a beat, he turned to me and said, no, your wife wants that one. So 2 things he knew. 1, we should be married, right? And 2, he knew who the boss was and who made the decisions. So last Saturday, I married my partner of 26 years. It's great. And it does feel different. It does feel different. We have to get used to the words wife, I guess. So last Saturday, we got married. The pastor pronounced us married. I kissed my wife for the first time, and then we looked around the ballroom at the more than 125 people, family and friends from around the country who were there to help us celebrate that wedding. There was, of course, the pastor, the Reverend Dr. C. Welton Gaddy. He used to be leadership in the Southern Baptist Convention. He still has his church, which is the Baptist Church in Monroe, Louisiana. Welton and I have enjoyed an incredible journey together. From the time he became president of the Interfaith Alliance in Washington, D.C., about 15 years ago, through to my tenure as his chief of staff, and then on to our wedding. Together, Reverend Gaddy and I have had the extraordinary opportunity to work with people like Bill Moyer and with Walter Cronkite. And we've also worked with and met with in both public but mostly private events. We've met with Mormon leadership, we've met with evangelicals, we've met with James Dobson, the radical religious right, to talk about generosity, to talk about humanity, and to talk about religious freedom. Welton has taught me so much about a generosity of spirit. I looked from Reverend Gaddy across to the back of the room to see Frankie Mink. This is the man who wrote the book autobiography of a recovering skinhead. He used to be a lieutenant in the White Aryan Resistance, and there he was at my wedding. Today he spends his time helping others get away from that lifestyle. About 5 minutes into our very first meeting about a year ago, we both realized that he was a young racist skinhead who actively and aggressively targeted people like me. And I was living in Portland, Oregon at the time, where white nationalists were implicated when 3 of their skinheads murdered an Ethiopian student, when violence exploded across Oregon, fueled by the homophobic rhetoric of the radical religious right. Hattie Mae Cohen, a black lesbian, and Brian Mock, a gay man, were firebombed as they slept by neo-Nazis like him. They choked and they burned and they died because of people like him. Churches were attacked and burned. Lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender queer folk were hunted down and hurt It was, as the radical right called it, it was a holy war. And so this first conversation with this former racist skinhead shook me to my core. He may have helped to target my family. He may have been responsible for at least a part of the terror that my community experienced. He may have helped to put my family on the top of their hit list. We were on the top of the white Aryan resistance hit list for 18 months. And yet today, because he understood who he could be, he teaches me all I need to know about redemption. At our wedding, we welcomed friends and family, people who represented our lifetime together. Her sister, my son, our nieces, great-niece, great-nephew, friends who stood with us, and some who at some point stood against us. There were progressives and conservatives, religious and non-religious, Democrats, Republicans, people who, like us, are on a journey toward our better selves. The reading today, Hebrew 10:24 through 25, has, I think, a lot of interpretations. I read it to mean that we should help each other, that we should enjoy each other's company. We should share and encourage each other and help our brothers and sisters live closer to their possibilities. I think it suggests that we extend ourselves, that we explore interesting and sometimes really surprising alliances, and that we create a place and a space for public dialogue and for quiet conversations. Many years ago, when Sumitra and I lived in Oregon during that horrific holy war called Ballot Measure 9, something amazing happened and something that changed our lives. Jan was a volunteer with the Radical Religious Right, the Oregon Citizens Alliance. You should know that leadership in the Oregon Citizens Alliance 20 years ago, Scott Lively is now the person who is being charged with crimes against humanity because he has counseled the Ugandan president to put homosexuals to death, and he's the one in Eastern Europe counseling folks there to use the death penalty against homosexuals. So these were the people we were fighting against. So anyway, Jan was working with them. Whenever we lobbied at the State House or at rallies across the state, Jan and her group of Christian ladies would table with their homophobic literature. And we'd always say hello, because we'd see them again and again and again. When we'd go to pick up lunch or buy coffee, we'd always stop and ask her and her friends if we could pick something up for them. They always said no, but they said no, thank you. When the election was over, and you should know, Ballot Measure 9 would have amended the Constitution of Oregon to declare that gay and lesbian people were wrong, perverse, and abnormal. That would have been part of the Constitution. So we won, but not by much. The election was over, and we were yet at another event, and she came over to me and she said that she was puzzled. What she had been told about us year after year after year, and what she had come to know about us was simply not the same. And so she asked if I could find 7 lesbians of faith, and I couldn't be one of them because I was too militant and strident and they wouldn't like me. But my partner would work because she's an ex-nun and they thought that that was a good thing. So could I find 7 lesbians of faith who would meet with her and 6 other Christian ladies who'd worked against us? These women met for 2 years in each other's homes. The first time they met, it was Jan's home, and Sumitra brought flavored bottled waters because she wasn't sure if they drank wine, and she brought some bakery goods, right? And they were surprised because they only knew lesbians as these, political people, and they were stunned that we had the social grace to bring a gift to someone's home the first time. So they came to know each other as women and women of faith first. It wasn't always pleasant. Sumitra would come home and tell me stories about the arguments. There was one night when Bibles got thrown around the room. But these women kept at it for 2 years in each other's homes. So the Oregon Citizens Alliance again decided they were going to do another referendum. And they called Jan, who was a great volunteer for them, and asked her to again table with them. She came back to the group, to the Christian ladies and the lesbians of faith, and told them that she had refused because she could no longer work against people she had come to love. Now, we weren't surprised that they loved us, right? But what surprised us was that we loved them too. Everything changed. A few years later, I had the great privilege of working with the theologian Martin Marty. He had put together an incredible civil dialogue model, and he asked if I would be a part of an experiment that would play live on National Public Radio. And what he did is he brought together folks from folks who would be, I'm going to use their language, pro-life, and folks who were pro-choice. And then he brought together family values people and then LGBT people. And we had to learn his model of civility and have a conversation, a live conversation on the radio. Well, it was the Rayburn building, and I always get lost when I'm on the Hill, so this was in DC. So I got there a little early, and I was pouring myself a cup of coffee, and this very nice man came and stood behind me. I asked if I could pour him a cup of coffee. And we went and we sat down together on the steps and just started to talk. I assumed he was with us, he assumed I was with him, and so we didn't talk about the politics of the day, we talked about everything else. And we really liked each other. So when Martin Marty called us together, we sat around this table, you know, the NPR people were there, and I realized John was opposite me on the table. I thought that was interesting. He was from the Family Research Council, which is a virulently anti-gay group. And so when we began to have conversation, he started spouting the rhetoric of his organization, that we were wrong, that we were the other, that we were immoral. And I stopped him, and as politely as I could, because I had said to Martin Marty that I would be polite, I said, John, when you say those things, you need to look at me. He started saying them again, looking at everybody but me. And I said, no, John, I'm sorry to interrupt, but when you say those things, and if you think you believe them, you need to look at me. And he started again, and he burst into tears. And so did I. Really bad radio, let me tell you. But in those few moments that we got to know each other as human beings, it was so hard then to take that stand and to say those things. So Jan, the Christian lady, and John, virulently anti-gay, they were moved. They were moved because we took away the stereotype and we showed them who we really were, and we got to know who they were. So fast forward 20 years. Here in Iowa, we have legal protections based on sexual orientation and gender identity. It's great. It didn't happen overnight. It happened because people like you made it happen. It happened because people like you stood up and said, this is what's right. We can get married, as Sumitra and I now know. But it's not over. We have so much more work to do. Whatever issue we're talking about, we know that the law changes, and then it takes decades and decades to change the culture, to change hearts and minds. But what we know, and all of us in this room know this, we're winning. We are winning. As progressive people, as the liberal religious, as gays or lesbians, bi or trans, friends or family, as people of faith, we are winning. And so my question today is this: what kind of winners will we be? What kind of a winner are you going to be? Will we extend our hand to those who have opposed us? Will we make a room for those who still believe that we're the other? Will we make room for people who've separated from us? Will we operate from a place of generosity and inclusion? Will we? Will we draw a line that separates us, or will we draw the circle that embraces all of us? And where does all this take place? I think we know the answer to that. It's where justice always begins. 55 years ago, Eleanor Roosevelt spoke at the United Nations, and she posed this question. She said, "Where, after all, do human rights begin?" And her answer was this. She said, "In small places close to home, so close and so small that they cannot be seen on any maps of the world. Yet they are the world of the individual person, the neighborhood she lives in, the school or college she attends, the factory, farm, or office where he works. Such are the places where every man, woman, and child seeks equal justice, equal opportunity, equal dignity, without discrimination. Unless these rights have meaning there, they have little meaning anywhere. Without concerted citizen action to uphold them close to home, we shall look in vain for progress in the larger world." Eleanor Roosevelt, 55 years ago. I've worked for justice toward human rights for most of my life. And if I've learned anything, it's this. I've learned that no one is beyond redemption, and no one needs to be my opponent or my enemy forever. I've had the privilege of working on a national level, but you know what? There, the opposition is often reduced to simply a stereotype. On a national level, with national organizations, we tend to posture and to spew the party line. And on a national level, we get away with that. But close to home in our neighborhoods, in our families at work, or in our congregations, we have to look people in the eye, and we have to be real. On all sides, we put a face, and a voice, our voice, to our reality. And that's when we meet people as people first. It's where the revolution, I think, lives. It's why we are winning. And so I have to ask, here in Iowa, will we reach out and find new ways to view those who've worked against us? Whatever our issue is, will we find new ways to understand our differences? Mahatma Gandhi said, "It's easy enough to be friendly to one's friends," right? But to befriend the one who regards himself as your enemy is the essence of true religion. The other is mere business. As you go home today, ask yourself this question: what kind of winner are you going to be? What kind of winner are you going to be in those places closest to home? Thank you.